program this week, we're going to be talking about culverts. Now, you may not think that's a very big subject, but in fact it's really quite interesting once you get into it. And still, speaking of water, we're actually also going to be talking to Tony Davarin about the latest things that we should know about irrigation. People are talking this week all about some new regulations that are coming in as far as bobby calves are concerned. Basically, they're going to have to be 4 days old before they can be transported. They have to have a lot of feed before they do that. They're not allowed to be sent across the strait before being processed. And basically, it's a whole lot of different things that are probably going to mean, with all due respect, that many bobby calves now won't be leaving the property. But there's also a bit of a push as far as animal health is concerned, because the government in the last week's budget put in another $10 million for promoting and developing animal welfare. Also this week, the South Island Farmer of the Year entries open, and that's a magnificent competition if you do want to get involved, or you know somebody who's doing very, very well and that they should be there. Also, Horticulture New Zealand is desperately trying to make horticultural type farming sexy, but I guess the main subject this week is the Mystery Creek National Field Days, and that's where you're going to find most of the people who service farming, and a hell of a lot of different farmers as well. But in just a moment, we're going to be talking iodine. Nick, iodine, it's one of your trace elements.
Yes, we'll wrap up the trace element thing with iodine. It's the last and probably the least well known in regards to monitoring and these sort of things with the trace elements.
We always used to use it as a child, that if you cut yourself, my mother would paint on iodine and it would sting like hell.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is a significant element in regards to animal health, and generally the typical visible and obvious signs of iodine deficiency is the goiter. And I remember as a child at school seeing pictures of humans in New Zealand with big goiters, and of course
big lump in the
big
throat.
Swelling of the thyroid gland in the throat.
Right,
yeah, and that of course promoted iodising salt as a means of getting the population sorted out in regards to iodine. And that is the classic thing that we see with livestock. It seems to be a particularly prominent issue with goats and then sheep. It can be a limiting issue with cattle as well, but much more commonly seen with sheep and goats. Not typically related to standard iodine deficiency, but more related to winter feeding of root crops that contain compounds that bind up the iodine and make it unavailable. And of course this is an obvious and major problem when winter feeding pregnant goats and sheep, especially in the southern parts of the country, and we can get these weak or sickly or dead offspring born with big goiters on their neck. But perhaps more importantly, it's recently been shown that iodine in its own right is very, very relatable to survivability in lambs. And so there's many practices around the country that now promote these starter drenches for lambs in particular. So newly born lambs getting a starter drench, and one of the big components of these starter drenches is iodine to enable the animal to get up and get going. And it seems to be some pretty good scientific justification that in fact does the job.
So it's fairly obvious if an animal, apart from big goiters?
Yeah, apart from the goiters, it's not that obvious, and that's what makes it a difficult thing to monitor. So in the past, we've tried various things, looking at thyroid hormone levels and things like that, but they're very, very poorly relatable to the actual iodine status of the animal. In the last 12 months, there's been a lot of work going into monitoring organic iodine levels in blood tissue and blood samples, but we're yet to have definitive answers. So at this stage, it's kind of a know the risks, and if you're feeding winter crops that could be a problem to pregnant stock, then maybe it's a good idea to talk to your vet about supplementing. Usually that's in the form of injecting long-acting depot shots of iodine into the pregnant animal so the fetus can get the iodine it needs. and maybe look seriously at the possibilities of using starter drench issues if that kind of very, very interventional system is going to fit on your farm. You know, if you've got the labour resource and the land resource that you can monitor these newborns and actually get in and give them the drench as required. And I guess at this stage that's the best way to go. But watch the space in regards to good tests available for monitoring iodine status in regard to sampling groups of animals.
You're indicating there's something coming down the tubes.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some new.
You're being quite hedgy there.
Yeah, well, there has been a lot of work, and it's looking like there may well be a good monitoring tool coming up. But when it's going to be released by the laboratories, I don't know.
No, that's fair comment. I mean, it was when you're looking at a new family for drenches, it took ages from the time that there was a whisper.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, apart from just monitoring very closely, do you do blood tests for it? Or?
No, you can, and that's I think what the new frontier is going to be, is looking at a blood sample that's going to be equatable to iodine status in the animal, and that's what's been sort of hidden from us at this stage, and up until now we've just not had a very, very good test to go on, really. So.
Look, I want to change the subject just a wee bit, because I know you're passionate about making sure that animals have got feed in front of them, and that if there's ice on their water supply, that the ice gets broken.
Yeah, so well, it's the winter months have just hit here in Canterbury very, very fast, and so yeah, as you've indicated, good forward planning, and this is particularly a problem with perhaps the smaller block holders. It's always a real big error in understanding how much stock that your property can carry through the winter months when we've got virtually zero growth, and it's almost impossible to maintain pregnant animals unless you've got some form of supplemental feeding. So a lot of foresight and planning should have gone into this, and as we've mentioned before, you know, making sure that there's always adequate water supply is also very important.
Breaking the ice on top of the trough.
Absolutely, check them every day, and you know, it's just it should be a routine sort of thing to do. But again, I think big problems, and needs to be maybe tweaking some conscience, and maybe some of the lifestyle block farmers in particular, that they're on the ball, and they've got some good source of advice in regard to feed planning and feed budgeting as to what's required for these animals going through the winter, and in particular any animals that are pregnant or young stock that have got growth to go through to get them to a marketable size.
It's not good just to look at them, because if they've got a whole fleece on the backs, you don't know what the back line's like.
Pregnant animals in particular, it's very, very important into the winter months to get your hand on the animal, so you can actually get a reasonable assertion as to what sort of condition score they're in, and you just can't, as you say, you can't see under fleece, and you've got to physically get your hand on them and feel them, and so these basic husbandry techniques are just essential if it comes to maintaining good animal welfare standards through the winter months. Yeah.
And trashy hay is not really going to do it.
Yeah, and hay's not going to do it. Even decent quality hay is probably okay for a maintenance feed, but when it comes to you know, other demands on the animal, such as pregnancy, lactation, producing milk, or growth, it's not going to do the job. And much more investment's going to have to go into much more higher quality feeds, such as, you know, well preserved silage and baleage and things. And unfortunately, as we all know, these things go through a process, and with that comes a cost. And so this is where the checks and balances as to economics of farming all come down to, as we all know.
Yeah, it's not an easy subject, Dick. Thank you very much indeed. And don't forget, I guess you should remember the fact that during the winter months we actually go away from salads and go into good, solid, hearty food. And we do that for a damn good reason, and your stock should also have that same philosophy when it comes to feeding them. In just a moment though, we're going to be catching up with Agritech.
So Peter, what is Lincoln Agritech?
Lincoln Agritech is an independent research company owned by Lincoln University, which is New Zealand's only specialist land-based university. And it was established back in around 1964 by the then Ministry of Agriculture, who needed to see some more engineering research in agricultural research.
And where does your research funding come from?
About 57% of it comes from long-term government research contracts, and the rest comes from the private sector. That might be a company that comes along to us and suggests a problem that they have, and we do a straight research contract for them. And we also have a business unit which sells irrigation design software called IrriCAD, which we sell internationally.
So what's your alignment with Lincoln University?
So we're owned by Lincoln University 100%. We're a company, a South, rather than a research department. I have an independent board that I report to, and we manage our own finances, and so we're totally financially independent of the university.
And what new developments do you have coming up?
We were fortunate enough to get $6 million worth of new funding from MB last year to develop 4 new projects in the research area. The first one is around understanding groundwater nitrate plumes and lag times. The second one around understanding animal body condition scores. The third one is around understanding fruit and vegetable dry matter content non-invasively. And the last one is produce a nitrogen fixing mulch film.
You mentioned IrriCAD before. You're quite well known for that in New Zealand.
Yes, IrriCAD's a product that we sell, irrigation design software. We sell that in 75 countries. We've now got it in 8 languages, and we've got a new thrust going on into China at the moment, where we're trying to assist Chinese, the government and growers to design and install better irrigation systems. So this software is used for designing irrigation systems in vineyards and in orchards.
So what sectors do you work in?
We work primarily in the primary sector. We work with the industrial companies that work in that sector. We work with agricultural companies, and we work in the environmental sector.
So you mentioned you've done some work in the environment and sensors. What's new on that front?
Yeah, there's a great new technology where we're trying to understand pest control and pest numbers. So we've got a new project called Print Acquisition for Wildlife Surveillance, and it's an electronic sensor pad which takes the paw prints and the body prints of different animals and can tell you what species it is and how many there are, and that technology can be then, those counts can be beamed back to managers.
So how would you get your technology out there and used?
Our philosophy around getting the technology out is to partner with private sector companies. So that might be through licensing to an existing company, or starting a startup, or even licensing to a startup. So a recent example is a company called Certis Bio, which we licensed 2 technologies to: a lactose sensor for detecting lactose in dairy processing plants, and a rapid biological oxygen demand test, which normally takes 5 days, which we can do in 2 hours with this technology. So we try to partner with companies to get it out and get it used, use capital from other people that are experienced in commercialising technologies, and get our technology used in the marketplace.
So nitrate sensors?
Yes, well, we're looking to really understand the fate of nitrates in the environment. One of the big issues with farming in New Zealand has been the discharge of nitrates. A lot of knowledge is known around nitrates at the surface, but not much known about what happens beneath the root zone. So we're developing a new low-cost nitrate sensor which will give us better temporal and spatial measurements of the nitrates and a better understanding of how to mitigate those nitrates in the future.
Very good advice there as well. A very interesting organisation. Just a moment or two, we're going to be talking to Tony Davlin.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good. You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion, It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
We've had rain and now we're getting frosts. What's the water levels like?
Yeah, they really are of concern. We very much depend for groundwater replenishment for irrigation on rainfall recharge. That is what gives us rises in groundwater levels to set us up for the next irrigation season. And this year we've got record groundwater levels all across Canterbury, all the way from up north of the Waimakiri River and all the way down south of Ashburton and that area down there. So we've got extremely low groundwater levels, and the irrigation season went until the 18th of May. So we were still irrigating on the 18th of May, which is just sort of unprecedented. I mean, the number of clients we've had that have said, "I've never irrigated in May, ever."
Normally, by the beginning of May, you're screaming at people saying, "Turn the switch off."
That's right. Well, they simply had to irrigate. So that, while that wasn't a lot of water, it was a very long season, and a lot of groundwater has been used. So you superimpose that on top of the fact that we had virtually no rainfall recharge in the winter of 2015. And we didn't have a big rainfall recharge in 2014. So we've had two winters in a row now where we've had very little groundwater recharge from rainfall. And right now we're looking at a very similar pattern again this year. I mean,
you mentioned Canterbury. Is it just Canterbury, or is it the whole country?
If you go into places like parts of the eastern Wairarapa, they're still very bad in there. Go up through North Canterbury, head up towards Kaikoura and Picton, those sorts of areas. Their groundwater systems are not in that great a shape either. Get up to Hawke's Bay. I wouldn't say they're out of the woods, but they've had significantly more rain than we have had, and so
they'll still be in dappled shade, Tony.
They will be in dappled shade. Yes, you did right. So it's a concern because we're halfway through June. You're looking at having your recharge happening now, so that it's sitting there waiting for use in case we have to start up somewhere in the latter part of August, for example, or the early part of September. So there aren't a lot of weeks looking out in front of us to get another really significant rainfall event on the plains, because we need it on the plains no matter where you are, whether you're in the Wairarapa or Marlborough or in Hawke's Bay or in Canterbury. We need it on the plains to get those groundwater levels in.
Now, you mentioned late August, but I mean, when did we start the last season? That was pretty early.
Yeah, we had some irrigation occurring in August last year. We took our first measurements on the 10th of August last year. So there's the potential with the way the weather systems are at the moment. If you look at them, we're just one high pressure system after another, little bit of a southwesterly, another high pressure system. That we need we need to get a change in this weather system to give us a significant easterly, southeasterly type rainfall event.
There's none looming.
There are none looming, and that's a big concern. Yeah, I mean, and people look out and they see the snow.
That was going to be my next question, Tony Devereux.
Yeah, there is a bit of snow out there. We lost it all over New Zealand. I've been backwards and forwards to the North Island in the last 3 weeks. And the snow that was sitting around on even places like the Kaimanawas, when I came back from there nearly 3 weeks ago now, they were pretty white, and the Ruahenis were quite white, Kaikuras were really white, but that snow has completely disappeared. So the snow that we get ends up in the rivers. It then ends up keeping sort of like the base of the groundwater in place, so that we keep the pressures up at the coast. Everywhere we need to have pressure at the coast, no matter where the aquifers discharge, so that we don't get saltwater intrusion. So it's really important for keeping that interface at the sea and keeping pressure there to make sure that we don't get saltwater intrusion. So a lot of that water is not sitting around. In terms, if you partition the water that's coming into the groundwater system, it's not there for irrigation use. It's what we get from rainfall. That's really important.
Yeah, rainfall, and it's always better water too, isn't it? For some reason.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Ruataniwha, what's happening up there?
Ruataniwha is sitting around waiting for Supreme Court, whatever the next one above High Court is. Yep. Forest and Bird appealed the decision of High Court, and it's a matter of law, so we're just waiting for that to get sorted. There is an institutional investor. The farmers have all signed up for the minimum amount of water they needed for it to press the green button. So we really are seriously just waiting for the High Court case to be finished. So the Supreme Court case to be heard and a decision come out of that for it to happen.
In the meantime, Central Plains is quietly moving on with...
Yes, it is. Central Plains is quietly moving on. I mean, there's a real push on at the moment to get people signed up for stage 2. And by all accounts, stage 2 is going very well. There's nothing like a couple of really dry years for the dryland guys to decide that, and no matter where you are, I mean, the same thing has happened with Ruataniwha. I mean, they got their 45 million cubic metres because nothing like 2 or 3 dry years, and you go from having, maybe 1,000 bulls on the property to having hardly any. That doesn't work, because when you sold your bulls, everybody else is selling their bulls. So,
absolutely.
And so, I mean, both, it's sudden, it brings home that it's not that, we haven't had that long a cycle since we last had a sequence of very dry years. You have to go back 2005-06, and we had that was the end of some very dry years. So nothing like that to sort of spark up the interest in it, and a lot of farmers are going to supplement their water with Central Plains water, because they're either short of litres per second or short of annual volume. So that's boosting the water that's being bought from CPW.
And that water is going to be able to be found, isn't it? Because you're talking about shortages.
Yeah, I mean, the CPW water and the likes of the Ruataniwha water, for example, that water is already earmarked. I mean, they've got consent for that water. I mean, Central Plains is only using a fraction of its consent at the moment, and they've got storage available in Coleridge, so stage 2 will happen.
Brilliant, Tony, thank you very much indeed. And sticking with the subject of water, in just a moment we're going to be talking culverts. Phil, when people think about culverts, they probably automatically think concrete, but you guys have changed all that.
Yes, absolutely. We have 2 types of culvert, both PVC, you can see behind me, and polyethylene. And of course the benefit is, actually we're coming into winter, we've had a whole lot of rainfall. I'm sure those gateways are getting very, very sticky and pretty awful. It's a matter of carrying that water away across the gateway somewhere else.
What's the difference between the 2 products?
Essentially, PVC, you need to be more careful about how you bed PVC, in that it's taking borrowed strength from the material around it. So it's important that it's well bedded and compacted as you actually go up and around the pipe, so that actually when you put downward force at the top, the pipe is actually restrained from forming an oval by the soil compaction around it. So it's important about how you actually install that product. And polyethylene itself is actually very robust. You get a polyethylene culvert, very strong. I mean, it's a little bit like the tank material that we make. They're very tough, so even if it overlises, it'll actually come back out, usually. They're just tougher, really.
So they'll obviously take the weight of a tractor or a decent-sized truck.
Yeah, absolutely. But the key is actually the burial depth and how far down you actually get that to get the right outcome. So we would, if we knew the load was going to be greater, bury the culvert further and actually provide much better grounding and bedding around it. It's simply about removing the force directly applied to the top of the culvert.
So where are you using them? Because we don't actually have many water races left.
No, that's right, absolutely. A whole lot of those water races have been replaced, many of them now being piped, and I guess that's the future. You take a piped water race system, it has a whole lot less loss than would have occurred in the past. So we're actually using water a lot more efficiently. And we've provided polyethylene pressure pipe into those systems as well.
There's a big market for these.
Absolutely. I mean, many farm properties actually have small tributaries and waterways going through them. And often you actually want to run farm tracks over them. How do you actually still discharge that tributary or waterway? Well, the answer is you actually put in a culvert to carry that water. So PVC, we produce it up to 500 millimetre OD, so it's quite a hefty hydraulic capability to carry that water from one side to the other.
Springs and I guess rain coming down off the side of a hill is what you're looking at.
Absolutely. You think about the amount of land that is in that situation in New Zealand, it's quite colossal. But it's important to actually size it correctly and to actually have a small amount of fall on the culvert as it goes through.
You have to calculate the rainfall and of course flooding.
Absolutely. You've got to determine how much water you actually have to carry through that culvert, and then what happens if you actually get a 1 in 100 year flood or something like that. Where's that water going to go? So the abutments to the culvert have to be reasonably carefully made such that it doesn't wash it all away, which would be a disaster, of course.
So there's a bigger need for these really than you would think.
Absolutely. I mean, what works this year might not work next year, might not work the following year, depending on flows. I mean, how many times have we seen the Rakaia, for instance, in flood where it's bank to bank, and it does happen.
I hadn't actually thought about all that water coming off the side of a hill. All I thought about was irrigation races and going over rivers and such when it came to culverts. Anyway, after the break, it's bull sale season.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce?
I can't think of everything.
Think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good. You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
Just a moment, we're going to be talking bull sales because the season is in full swing. June, it's your bull sale.
Well, yeah, that's probably about the only positive I sort of hear people saying about, and it's been good to see the breeder getting good returns for beef at the moment. But yeah, that unfortunately for us, we sold our cows last winter and we haven't sort of really had anything to sell. So yeah, that's what Robbie, our bull sale will be the first time we've had to sort of have some cattle to sell. So hopefully, you know, we're a wee bit concerned that there's a lot of cows down around the area, so we've been trying to canvass around a few other areas and try and, yeah, hopefully we'll have a few people that have made a bit of money out of this strong beef market, and yeah, be interested in buying a few bulls, yeah.
Well, you can't say that they've been pampered when you look at what they're grazing on.
Well, no, you know, you sort of got to try and do the best you can, but it's one thing that I think, you know, certainly one of our ideals is that, you know, we run a true commercial operation with high sheep numbers here, and all the cattle have to compete, you know, normally with the sheep, and yeah, that's right. As you can see, we've been out with the bulls. Certainly, you know, being tested, they were lighter at weaning, and yeah, they sort of had a bit of a reprieve when we got the January rain, but now she's, you know, we certainly would have them on a lot better tucker normally than what they are coming up to the bull sale, that's for sure. So, yeah.
Rick, tell me about your red oak beef, because that's a little off farm activity.
Yeah, well, we just sort of, it was a bit of a follow-on thing, Rob, from, we had a lease block where we finished a lot of steers up in Hamner a few years ago, and we sort of sold one farm and bought a couple more. We sort of had a bit of a restructure, and we, you know, decided to, we've had a good family association with Harris Meats in Cheviot, known the boys there for a number of years, and we decided that, you know, we've got our pure New Zealand bloodlines have featured strongly in the stake of origins over the years, and that meat is, you know, particularly sort of tender. It's got a good amount of intramuscular fat and a nice deep red colour, which is tenderness. That's what the game's about. So we followed on, and we've decided to market our own brand, and we've sort of really just in the initial stages the last 12 months or so, and that's been working pretty well. We've had a great response and been to a few, you know, the Christchurch show and the Christchurch food show just recently, and yeah, we're sort of selling a wee few, trying to get it into a couple of smaller supermarkets around Christchurch at the moment, so it's been good.
The people can buy it online?
That's right, yeah, Red Oak Premium Angus website, and you know, for us we just sort of focused on the cuts that are most commonly used. You know, when you're killing beast, you know, everyone wants a steak or different parts, but we sort of wanted to get, you know, we've got to get rid of the whole beast, so we've sort of got about 20 kilo boxes, and it's a breakdown of sort of your steaks, schnitzel, beef schnitzel, a couple of roasts, and then we've got gourmet tomato and basil sausages that have been award winners for Harris Meats, and also some really good burger patties and mince. So that's the sort of breakdown, and it's about 50% sort of primal red meat and 50% sausages and mince and patties. So yeah, we just sort of sell it on a per kilo basis, and it's delivered around the South Island at this stage, and yeah, no, it seems to be working all right. So.
Now, Rick, this is the red oak beef lot, so yeah, everything is traceable.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, as you can see, it's labelled on the box here that we've got like the tag number of the animal. You know, we know how they're bred we know how they're being fed, and you know, they go through Harris Meats and they're boxed in a package, and you'll see the assortment from the different types of steak, the sausages, patties, it's all in there. You know, it's the same breakdown every box, and yeah, no, it's quite good. You know, we can follow sidelines through, or you know, different
People really want to know what animal it came off, because
Well,
it is obviously the same animal.
It seems to be, yeah, the most interesting thing. Sort of, people want to know the story, and you know, that they're interested in, you know, questions that we've been asked at some of these food shows. You know, they want to know what the sausage casings are and everything. They want to know, you know, how they're bred, where they're run, and that people are pretty interested in, you know, what they're getting with their food, or, you know, it doesn't, you know, it's not organic, but it's pretty, you know, grass-fed, naturally run. I mean, you know, so
Nothing nicer than that.
Well, yeah, it seems to be, you know, people are enjoying it, so we haven't had a single complaint about anything really yet. So yeah, so must be doing all right.
And we'll be going out to that bull sale and giving you a bit of the atmosphere as we join in, and hopefully I don't come home with one. We're talking about refugees coming into New Zealand, but it's not only people coming into New Zealand. The focus by some Lincoln University students is sending money over to them. Lincoln University students raising money for someone on the other side of the globe.
We are a Lincoln-based group. There are about 10 of us, and we're supporting a charity called Impetigizo, which stands for unity, and it's their symbol is the baobab tree. I probably shouldn't pronounce that properly. Yeah, and yeah, there's just a group of 10 of us, and we've been working really hard over this past semester, formulating a plan of what we want to do. So we're planning on going over to Malawi in the semester break next year to support an orphanage that's been set up by a local Christchurch-based couple, Bob and Regina, who run the charity called Impetigizo.
So that's why Malawi.
We previously organised a mission trip to Tonga with a group of Lincoln students, and then one of the other girls, Jess, approached me saying that she wanted to do a similar thing, and so we were looking for someone, a charity or organisation that we wanted to support. And the original idea was to go to Tanzania because her school had raised, I think, $25,000 to support a school over there. And we thought that we could probably try and do that again. But the contact fell through for that, unfortunately. But I was just printing things out in the landscape building, and then I saw a poster for this charity based in Christchurch that has their orphanage in Malawi, and so we got in contact with them, and then they were just incredibly excited that someone had actually found them. So, yeah.
What's your target?
We're aiming to raise $30,000 in a year and a half, which is pretty ambitious, but we think that with the plans that we've got and the fundraising that we're trying to do, we should be able to get there, so fingers crossed.
Who are you going to get the funds from?
We've run some fundraisers, so we did a Malawian lunch that we did last week, so we had a $5 lunch and everyone got to try some delicious food that Regina prepared for us. And then we're doing some smaller fundraisers just in Lincoln Town, in the township, with the grass, providing some support for some fundraising nights. And then we've got a few bigger events.
Some very strange noises. I think it's the pipes.
Yeah.
Because winter's struck.
Yeah.
So you're obviously casting quite a wide...
Yeah. So we're trying to approach as many people as we can kind of think of for family and friends support. We'll probably approach our local Rotary and Lions clubs that have supported us in the past, and then just anyone and everyone that we can kind of think of that could get on board to support us.
This is all part of your Future Leaders Scholarship?
Not for all of us. Not all of us in the group are on the Future Leaders Scholarship. For some people, it's part of what we have to do, but you have to be on a club or committee, so you have free choice of which one you want to be on. So for me personally, this is something I'm really passionate about, so I kind of wanted to be on a club and committee that I would dedicate myself to properly. So that's kind of why I decided to do something like this again, because I really enjoyed organising the mission trip to Tonga. So wanted to do something like that again for my last year.
You are going over there?
Yeah, so I'll be going over again, so this time next year. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
How much do you have on your kitty?
We've probably got a little bit under $1,000.
So just over 29,000 to go.
Yeah, only 29 to go.
And after the break, we're going to be talking to Roddy McKinnon.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
Just wanted to take a couple of moments out and talk about some of the things that are happening around New Zealand. And I guess in modern day terms, this isn't an opinion, it's what I think is now known as a blog. But animal welfare. It's very interesting that Ministry of Primary Industries have come out with yet another lot of rules and regulations, this time about bobby calves. And they will be implemented as of the beginning of this spring. Summarise it very briefly, it's all about looking after the bobby calf. They've got to be transported in a proper and comfortable way. They've got to be 4 days old before they are transported. They must be fed and housed during that time. They can't be thrown up onto the back of a truck. They must have loading and unloading things. And it sort of quietly goes on and on and on and on, which is great. It is really, really good. My point, though, seriously, is that the national media, or is it the national media, or is it just a very few people who are winding the national media up? We get footage, don't we, of rats climbing all over pigs that are in crates, and it's really, really disgusting footage. We had footage which basically showed calves being kicked and mistreated, and of course it went viral. That's another new term for us old guys to get around. It went viral as everybody was clamouring on and saying, tut, 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 this is really, really seriously bad. Points are, SPCA, MPI, move real fast, and they wave big, big sticks whenever there's anything going wrong. Starving animals, you watch how quick they move. When somebody says there's a house with a couple of calves outside, or there's a horse there, or there's a dog there that is starving, watch how quick the authorities will move. Now the other thing this has come out recently, and yes, I am kicking the national media. It came out that there's now a move by the animal welfare supporters saying that those poor little baby calves are ripped away from their mothers the minute they're born, and ripped away, leaving the mother and the child terribly, terribly stressed. Now, a couple of things. A, it's always happened. B, that calf goes into a nice warm shed gets fed at least twice a day, is pampered and is looked after very, very well. So that's the first point. The second point is that these people who are jumping up and down about the cows being ripped away from their mothers and the traumatic mental problems that will prove, also the same people who say, tut, 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 farmers, how can you leave baby lambs out in the weather where it's cold and sometimes it rains and those poor little things get wet? Hey, listen, seriously, animal welfare, whatever you like to call yourselves, actually take a long, hard look at what really is happening and what the government's putting in place. Let's talk about velveting. I mean, that's been around for a long, long, long time in New Zealand as an industry. And as soon as MPI realised that it was starting to happen, what do? They went in and they said, you can't do your velveting yourself, you've got to have the total anaesthetics, you've got to do the whole thing, and it's got to be done by a vet or somebody who is totally qualified to be able to do it. Believe me, there are a lot of animals that get pampered a hell of a lot better than the conditions that some human beings are living in. I just thought I'd have a wee chat to you about that. Roddy, we're in the world of DIY, but there seems to be a lot of people who think that they can do a professional's job.
And to a certain extent, there's a percentage of those who can. We get quite a few people that wants to basically take out the funeral director and do it themselves. And there's a couple of motivations for it. One will be that they think they can do the job on their own and they are independently minded, and that would be the Kiwi way. The other reason would be is because they don't want to spend money on a funeral director. And between those two extremes, they're both the same flip side of the same coin, I guess. The funeral director sits in an awkward position because we have an industry and a profession that is based on doing things right the first time and always getting it right, because we make the joke that funerals you can't do over. Marriages, yes. Funerals, no. And so you don't get a chance to correct a mistake. And because it's a very emotional time, there is a lot. If something goes wrong, it tends to be out of proportionately a bigger issue than it would be on a day-to-day. It's very, very simple. If you're playing a track of music at a party and you play the wrong track of music, at a party you stop, play the right piece of music, and life carries on. At a funeral, the funeral director plays the wrong track of music, and without being too blunt about it, the complaint that you'll get from the family will be like it was the worst event on that particular day globally. And we understand that, and so we're very particular about everything we do is belt and braces. We have plan A, B and C. We organise, we rehearse, we get everything done and behind the scenes that families don't have to think about it. And so generally, most funeral companies, if they're anywhere halfway competent, it will happen the way it's been organised, the way it has been set out, and what they get is what they're going to pay for, and it should tick all of the boxes. Going back to the DIY element, lots of people want to make their own casket, and that's absolutely fine. I understand there's things called coffin clubs out there, and they're blokes in a shed, and blokettes, I guess, who've decided to make their own casket for whatever reason. I think the making of the casket is more of a social thing and something fun to do, as opposed to they've got a burning desire to have their own casket, because most people aren't anticipating using it for some considerable length of time. But I was involved in a funeral very recently where a young man died. Actually, one of my very good friends died, and another mate of mine made his casket. He was a carpenter, and it was totally appropriate, and it made total sense. It had to be. It was going to be a custom casket anyway, and so the funeral company involved, it wasn't our funerals in the North Island, but they were very supportive of that because that had significance to that family, to that group of friends, and I, as a funeral director looking on the outside, thought it was entirely appropriate. I have, however, dealt with a number of families who have made their own caskets, and in hindsight it was a bad move for a couple of reasons. The first up is that the casket that they made was structurally unsound and visually inappropriate. It looked horrible. And it didn't look dignified, and the finishing quality was poor, because what most folks don't think about is that if they haven't already made it prior to the person dying, they've only got a very short window of time to get it done. And it's not the easiest of things to make. And so often it's rushed, they put themselves under immense pressure, and it gets pushed out at the last possible minute. They've worked until 2 in the morning the day before the funeral. They're tired, they're grumpy, and it just created the pressure they didn't need. I have had other ones where the family have done it well in advance and they've painted it and kids have been drawn all over it and it's been fantastic. Again, comes back to the basic premise of good funeral directing, that things are done in advance, carefully and in considered matter, not at the last moment. I've been with other families where they have chosen to do things themselves because they feel they can. Might be a slideshow, might be organising the music, and inevitably I'll get a call at 9 or 10 o'clock the night before the funeral saying, oh, we've just run out of time, we haven't got, can you do X, Y, Z? Often we can, but at that point we're having to pay somebody else to do it, bring in a subcontractor, the cost goes through the roof, and the satisfaction level from both parties, both the funeral director and the family, also goes through the roof because it feels like a stress that didn't need to happen. So my thoughts are in regarding DIY is that if you're going to go that way, most funeral companies are supportive to a point, as in they'll give you advice and information. But what they want you to do is do it well in advance. They don't want to be doing it in the 2 or 3 day window that a normal death occurs and a funeral occurs. So it's very much a matter of, okay, getting good advice, deciding what's appropriate for you to do, and also remembering that funeral companies do this every day of every year, and in some cases, one of our companies has been doing it for 124 years. We should know what we're doing. We should make it happen appropriately.
If you provide a casket as a family, A, you've got to make sure that the person fits inside it, but B, you dress them up as well, don't you?
We do 2 things when a family provide a casket. The first thing we do is we stress test it. We want to make sure the bottom's not going to fall out of it. So we will impose some weight in there, generally that involves us standing in it on a trestle to make sure that it'll support the weight of the deceased. The second thing is, by law, any body that is being transported must be transported in a leak-proof container. So we will generally line the casket with some sort of impermeable membrane, aka plastic, to make sure that it meets that particular statute. Thirdly, and less importantly, it's an aesthetic thing. Sometimes the family will have lined it what we call a side set, which is basically drapery inside of the casket to hide the internal manufacturer and just to make it look more like a, I guess, a bed. Sometimes family do that. Sometimes we'll do it for the family if they don't want to do it, and it's not critical. It's nice if there's going to be a viewing of the family that the casket looks nice, it's presented nicely, but if the family choose not to do that, that's their call. If it's my casket that I'm supplying for the family, then all of these things are dealt with and it is finished to an impeccable level.
It's a very small window, isn't it, from the moment that they get the news to the moment of the end of the service. And there's a lot of emotion in there.
Well, there is, and people get very excited. People who have planned weddings will know what I'm talking about, that people stick their hand up and say, oh, I'd like to do this, why? And then you go, okay. And then what most people don't realise is that someone actually needs to chase that person to make sure it gets done in a timely fashion. And that's what inevitably where it all breaks down. As in, you know, Auntie Marge says, right, I'm going to do the catering. And then Auntie Marge has 18 phone calls that day from everyone in her bridge club, and she doesn't get round to making the sausage rolls. And so at the last minute, someone's going, oh, we better go to Copeland's. That decision could have been made a long time ago, and Auntie Marge could have sat down with the bridge club, which, let's face it, was more important
to her
and to her grieving process than making sausage rolls. And I think the decision making at a funeral is often poor. It's often emotionally loaded, and it's more about what people are feeling in their hearts, that they want to be engaged and be involved. I still say, and I say this as a funeral director, so, you know, hand on heart, I'm not pushing my own barrow too much. There's lots of opportunities for families to be actively engaged in funeral service, whether or not it's a stressful way of being engaged or in a nice way. That's the 2 different ways. And we can tell you how best, if you give us your thoughts, we can go, well, that's a good idea. Why don't you do this and we'll take care of this behind the scenes? Or, you know what, probably better off if we look after that one and you do this. It's very much a discussion. It's not, no, we're the funeral director, you'll sit there and do what you're told. I'd love to do that. That made my life so much easier.
I think the word is, Roddy, that there is a major rule, and that is that there are no rules.
There are no rules.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, if you want to recap on what Roddy was saying, or any of the other items on our program this week, get onto our website and you can have another look at them. It's called ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed what he was saying, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.